IPOB's Struggle for Biafra and the Colonial Legacy of Uti Possidetis by Barrister Njoku Jude Njoku. This pamphlet provides a comprehensive yet abridged examination of Motsi Nnamdi Kanu's indigenous people of Biafra IPOB and their agitation for Biafra's independence through established international and municipal legal frameworks, such as referendums, as an assault on the colonial mentality of Uti Possidetis. It addresses the historical status of Biafra, critiques the principle's application in Africa, compares it with India's partition model, and positions Kanu's fight as a struggle for freedom and equality rooted in colonial injustice. Historical context and ancient status of Biafra. Biafra's historical status is rooted in its long-standing recognition on early modern maps. Research indicates that the name Biafra or its variants, such as Biafra and Biafar, appeared on maps as early as the 15th century based on European cartography of West Africa. For instance, historical records show references to Biafar, Biafra, and Biafars on maps from the 15th to the 19th centuries, encompassing areas in modern-day Nigeria, Cameroon, and Equatorial Guinea. Biafra. Wikipedia. This suggests that Biafra is an organic entity predating the colonial constructs that later defined African borders and reflects a cultural and historical identity, particularly among the Igbo people and their cousins in parts of north-central and south-south regions of Nigeria. The modern movement for Biafran independence gained prominence during the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970, when the southeastern region, predominantly Igbo, declared independence under Lieutenant Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu, citing ethnic persecution and massacres in northern Nigeria. Biafra secession, Nigerian Civil War, map and legacy. Britannica. The war, which resulted in significant loss of life, estimated at 500,000 to 2 million civilians, many from starvation due to a blockade, ended with Biafra's reintegration into Nigeria in 1970. Nigerian Civil War. Wikipedia. However, the desire for self-determination persisted, with IPOB emerging in the 21st century as a youth-led movement advocating for renewed recognition of Biafra's right to exist. Republic of Biafra. 1967 to 1970. blackpast.org. The Principle of Uti Possidetis and its Colonial Underpinnings. The principle of Uti Possidetis, meaning as you possess, so you may possess, was adopted by the Organization of African Unity, OAU, in 1963. With the Cairo Resolution pledging respect for colonial boundaries at independence. This was intended to prevent violent conflicts over disputed territories and stem secessionist movements, as noted in analyses of African statehood, South Sudan, Uti Possidetis rule, and the future of statehood in Africa. Africa law. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, reinforced this in the Burkina Faso/Mali frontier dispute 1986, stating its purpose was to prevent fratricidal struggles provoked by the challenging of frontiers following the withdrawal of the administering power. Uti Possidetis. Roman law. Britannica. However, research suggests that Uti Possidetis has perpetuated colonial injustice by maintaining artificial borders that do not reflect pre-colonial states and peoples. In Africa, colonial boundaries often lumped together ideologically, culturally, and socially incompatible groups, leading to irreconcilable value systems and ongoing conflicts. For example, the Nigeria-Cameroon dispute over the Bakassi Peninsula, resolved by the ICJ in 2002 but still causing tension, highlights how Uti Possidetis has sustained unviable constructs. The fallacy of Uti Possidetis juris, transboundary fishing in disputed maritime boundaries as a threat to Africa's peace and security. Critics argue that the OAU's decision was misguided as it failed to interrogate the root causes of secessionist claims such as those in Biafra, Katanga, and Somaliland, which reflect the need for internal self-determination. The principles of Uti Possidetis and its implication on border demarcation in Africa. The evidence leans toward Uti Possidetis being a form of European imposition shaped by colonial legal thought and prioritizing stability over local needs. This has kept Africa in a perpetual state of human underdevelopment as artificial states struggle with ethnic tensions, economic disparities, and political instability. For Biafra, Uti Possidetis was used to justify the defeat of its independence movement in 1970, denying the Igbo people their right to self-determination and perpetuating marginalization. Comparison with India's partition model. India's partition in 1947 provides a contrasting model. The British, facing communal tensions between Hindus and Muslims, partitioned India into India and Pakistan based on religious demographics, allowing for the creation of states that reflected predominant cultural and religious identities. Partition of India. Wikipedia. This process, while resulting in mass migration and violence, enabled India, predominantly Hindu, to pursue a developmental model aligned with its value system and Pakistan as an Islamic republic to express its own identity. Similarly, Bangladesh seceded from Pakistan in 1971, further illustrating that when colonial boundaries do not fit local realities, secession can be a path to self-determination. Partition of India. Summary, cause, effects, and significance. Britannica. In Africa, the application of Uti Possidetis has prevented such flexibility, forcing diverse groups into artificial states. Motsi Nnamdi Kanu's argument that Africa should have emulated India's model has merit, as it suggests that respecting pre-colonial or cultural identities could lead to more stable and prosperous states. For instance, allowing Biafra to secede through a referendum, as IPOB advocates, could align with this approach, enabling the region to develop based on its own cultural and economic realities. Motsi Nnamdi Kanu's agitation and IPOB strategy. Motsi Nnamdi Kanu's IPOB has emerged as a significant voice in the 21st century, advocating for Biafra's independence through peaceful and legal means, such as a referendum. This approach contrasts with the armed conflict of the 1967 to 1970 war and aligns with international norms of self-determination as enshrined in the United Nations Charter and various human rights instruments. Legal matters. The principle of Uti Possidetis juris and the unfolding Nigerian case. Pegasus reporters. Kanu's fight is often misunderstood because it challenges the status quo and the colonial legacy embedded in Uti Possidetis. It is not merely about political separation but about restoring organic pre-colonial states where peoples can govern themselves based on their cultural, social, and economic realities. Kanu's agitation is rooted in the belief that the current Nigerian state is an artificial construct that fails to represent the diverse peoples within its borders, particularly the Igbo people of Biafra. The marginalization of the Igbo, coupled with historical grievances from the Nigerian Civil War, fuels the demand for independence. By advocating for a referendum, IPOB seeks to achieve independence democratically, free from the constraints of colonial borders, and to rectify the injustice of Uti Possidetis. The battle beyond understanding. The battle Kanu fights is beyond the understanding of most because it challenges the very foundations of post-colonial Africa. It is a fight for freedom, equality, and the right of peoples to determine their own destiny, principles that are universal but have been denied to Africa for too long. The user's position that Kanu is fighting for an Africa of organic pre-colonial states and peoples resonates with this vision as it seeks to dismantle the condescending colonial injustice embedded in Uti Possidetis. This struggle is complex as it requires a shift in international law and African politics, but it is essential for achieving true self-determination and development. Comparative analysis and recommendations. To contextualize, consider other cases where Uti Possidetis has been challenged. Eritrea's independence from Ethiopia in 1993 following a referendum and South Sudan's secession in 2011, both recognized internationally, suggest that secession can be legitimate under certain conditions. South Sudan. Uti Possidetis rule and the future of statehood in Africa. Africa law. These cases contrast with Biafra's 1970 defeat, highlighting the need for legal and democratic processes such as referendums to achieve recognition. Recommendations for Africa include adopting joint development agreements for shared resources and revisiting Uti Possidetis to allow for self-determination based on cultural identities as seen in India's model. Conclusion and implications. Research suggests that Kanu's IPOB agitation challenges the colonial mentality of Uti Possidetis, which has perpetuated underdevelopment by maintaining artificial borders. The evidence leans toward Uti Possidetis being a flawed principle, as it ignores pre-colonial states and peoples, contrasting with India's partition model, which allowed for cultural and religious self-expression. Kanu's fight for a referendum is a call for freedom and equality, rooted in the injustice of colonial borders, and it is a battle that transcends conventional understanding, aiming for an Africa of organic pre-colonial states. For further exploration, researchers can consult historical map collections, such as those at Stanford University, Africana Historical Maps of Africa, an online exhibit for definitive proof that Biafra is older than even the United Kingdom. Other academic articles on African decolonization and secessionism should be of immense interest to students of Biafra's fight for emancipation. Stay tuned for more updates and have a blessed day.